Well, hello, hello. So sorry for the delay in day 4 of the free mini series, how to talk to your animals and receive messages from them and also help them in their own healing process, which in turn helps you to heal yours. And I wanted to talk today about how we can, first of all, help our animals who have chronic conditions like seizures, because some of you asked about that yesterday, and share another one of my power tools in my first aid kit that I'd love for you to try with your own animals and let me know what changes and shifts you see happening, and be open to instant miracles. And always remember that when we're communicating with our animals, they're always in the present tense. So we want to stay present and focused and keep that heart-to-heart connection open so that you can hear the direct messages, because remember, they communicate so quickly and so directly that a lot of times we miss it because we get involved in the mind. And I was just talking to a client about that earlier, how to always set the intention to release any expectations, decisions, judgments, conclusions, and computations about any and all of how things are going to work or what things are going to look like, and let go of the need to control, because I think that's one of the most beautiful lessons that our animals teach us, whether they are in the wild or sharing our houses with us. And to just remember that they are here to guide and to teach us lessons, either through positive or negative perception filters, and to also show you what is happening in your worlds. There's no good or bad, only lessons to restore balance and harmony. And all the animals, and remember, we are anima, we are made of animus, we are the microcosm of the macrocosm, as are our bodies, and we are connected. There are no lines of separation, only separation by the levels of our own awareness. So just know that I talk about this often, that I see this as a separation sickness, a disease where we've cut off and we've disconnected from nature and the earth Deva and our own body Deva and the animals and our natural responses. And it really is time to remember and reconnect and become whole again. And the river systems and the termites and the bees, they all carry the stories with their huge intelligence over millennia. And it just seems very apt today that we are in a time of a full moon where we're really being asked to stay in our truth and trust what we know and trust what the animals and nature are trying to teach us. And when we look at the morphic field of a certain species, they often have told me that they see the destruction of what separation of humans is creating, and that is our lack of relationships and the projections and the lack of relating. Or what Richard Levine describes as nature deficit disorder. It's not ADHD, it's not OCD. It really is this disconnection from nature. So just remember that on this day where you are probably not here because you're cooking up a beautiful Thanksgiving dinner, to just acknowledge the animals that have given up their lives to nurture yours, and the plants that have made their way to your table, and to embrace the harvest and remember with gratitude those that have lived well and died well and come before you, including non-human forms, and the ones that continue to wake us up, that we are part of nature, because that way we can then take advantage of all that nature offers us to provide calm in all the aspects of our lives and contribute back to earth. And I think it's such a message that never gets old, that to remember, as the Bushmen and some of the indigenous people and the First Nations that lost a lot, that may be grieving today, because they lost the lands that they had inhabited for centuries when America was colonized, and it's happened in Africa, and it's happened all over the world. So just remember to take time to give thanks for nature's harvest and the bounty and the abundance that is available to you all the time. And I will want to speak a little bit to conflict today, and also how we can create mutual cooperation with insects and animals that we sometimes deem as pests that are perhaps in your sugar bowl, or are building their homes in places of your space that you would rather they not, and how you can sometimes negotiate and let them know of the consequences of them staying there, so that they can make an informed choice to either cooperate with you and move their hive or move their nest, or suffer the fate of being killed if they don't. And to just know that our connection with animals and nature really stimulates this deeply buried aspect of our nature within us, our true nature, and the rekindling of a lost connection that allows us to stop the separation sickness and be part of something greater in oneness and contribution and in communion for a healthy, more holistic world, to leave the world a better place than we found it. And I'd love to know what you're doing to give ritual and thanks today, wherever you are in the world, whether you celebrate Thanksgiving or not, to really stay in that space of active appreciation and presence that the animals are constantly in, and reminding us, to be the guardians of our souls as well as the guardians of the planet, in a time where we've lost our way as a species. And to also bring in that energy of the white lion archetype, which is the archetype of the wounded healer or the injured god, and the Christ consciousness that animals hold, the white lions hold, that reminds us to be aware of ourselves as ethical and spiritual beings that are just made of or inhabiting this bodysuit that is soft, fleshy, animal, soft-bodied, all-feeling beings in a body, and that we're not just our physical beings. And if you're with me, I hope you've been enjoying this series. Please like it, share it, comment, enter the competition. I'll be giving away prizes tomorrow for those that followed the guidelines or my ask to participate and share this with people, because it really is my deepest desire that we truly take accountability, our personal responsibility to step into or move back with an open heart into that beautiful energy of the avatars, which is the symbol of light. And that in the Ice Age, the Leo Aquarius urges us to own and acknowledge that we all have the power of light, the white lion within us, the animal body within us, and to just rise up and illuminate, because it really is the lack of abundance of other people's fears that's putting so much pressure on how are we going to survive in the I am presence, and in a world where we are navigating through uncharted territory. And it is a little terrifying and a little bit scary. And I also don't know if we will ever really stop judging or ranking or anthropomorphizing animals, because it seems to be very ingrained in our nature as human beings. But we can certainly try. And I think the meaning and the identity always causes us to fragment, doesn't it? Away from the mystery and the adventure of and the privilege of actually opening our eyes and that first breath at lung time in the morning to start a new day, to hit Control Alt Delete when we say goodbye to the sun every night, and to say hello to a new day and a new adventure, and to just engage in a time where there is so much heartbreak and so much tragedy and loss and grief at the state of the world, to just stay in active appreciation and listen to what the animals are saying. Because the more I observe what the animals tell me and what I see in nature, how to engage in the mystery of life, the more I realize and appreciate just how much wisdom and intelligence that the animals and nature have to offer us. So let me just check the comments for a second. Hi, Mariette. Nice to see you here. And I know I apologize for being late. As I said, I had a little bit of a delay getting on today. So if you're listening to the recording, please let me know if you're finding this mini-series helpful or valuable or exciting, that you have a renewed sense of wonder in wanting to learn how to deepen your relationship with the animals and just to come into more right relationship with nature, and how else I can support you in doing that. And I want to just sort of get first to really look at the conflict of animals that maybe are in spaces that you would rather not. And then I'm going to go on and give you a body process that you can use specifically for any kind of traumatic brain injury or seizures or any kind of sort of mental disharmony that may be showing up in your animals. And of course, all these body processes work for people as well. But first of all, just remember that the incongruence that we hold is that we are highly sensitive, empathic beings. And if you have a creative mind, you probably were the ones that were made fun of or didn't do so well in sort of the way the right brain analytical schooling systems are set up. But to look at also from that space that we are both predator and prey. And in fact, we have been trained to have dominate other species. And that prey aspect of the psyche is very solidified in the partnership with animals. And these days, the predator side of the personality is our greatest downfall, because it's sort of common to devour the prey aspect very early on in life. And we see this in, going to church on Sundays with lessons of turning the other cheek, and then do unto others becomes a rabid dog on Monday. So for change to occur, the human psyche has to really accept another matrix of wisdom that's capable of balancing that violent nature of our predator inside. And I love the analogy of the lion laying down with the lamb, the Christ consciousness, of really stopping the internal warring so that we can have more compassion and more mindful regard for other species that we may think of as pests or a disruption or an inconvenience in our lives and in our homes. And to really start to look at that space again of, with the whole planet and humanity teetering on destruction right now, what will it take for us to wake up and gain our Lionhearted leadership and the respect of the lions and the animals and nature again? Because our deepest fear really is that we are not enough, and we need to start to look at how we can use our internal resources and our own power to create light in the world and free ourselves from the lack and scarcity and poverty programs that have been running humanity into disregard for other species and for the way that we're using up the resources of the planets and the oceans. And I know it may seem a very harsh universal law, which dictates that only the successful survive, but we have to really look at how the concrete jungle has really turned us away from opening our hearts and looking for mutual cooperation and looking at what's in it for me and what do I have to lose, rather than looking at the success of the team or the collective is so dependent on the strength of us as individuals, to really each step into our own gifts and talents and capacities and then serve in a greater way, to concentrate on our strengths rather than our weaknesses. And what nature shows us so well is that when we're working toward increasing our own personal strengths, we bring more fulfillment and bring our communities and our humanity closer to that space of heartfelt, lion-hearted leadership. And that's what I want for you. So just know that I think that all disease, and the disease of the mind or the disease of the body, it all has a very spiritual base, a very symbolic reference, and that we owe it to ourselves, don't we? And the people that we're here to serve, to let ourselves be found and be the voice that we are all being called to be in our questions, not in a conclusionary reality, and allow life to use you in a good way, to bring to you the answers, and then embrace it. The same way that when we get information back from the animals or the wild ones, of the reasons why they're doing what they're doing, that we can actually be in allowance of that, and then look at if they're willing to change their minds. I know many times I've had a hive of wild bees hanging in under my porch when I lived in Cape Town, and every now and again when it got really, really hot, they would swarm, and they never stung anybody, but it was a little terrifying for my cats and my dogs at the time. And when I asked them, what it would take for them to move their queen to the back of the property where nobody ever went, and it was much quieter and away from the road, and that I would plant them some beautiful flowers just for them to use to make their honey, they did comply and move, and I didn't need to disrupt their hive. They were happy to relocate themselves. And also, I think telling them the consequences of them not being able to come to some mutual agreement with you could be the death and demise of not only their own lives, but to the whole of the hive in that case, or to the whole of the termite or the ant nest. They do comply. And then you don't have to, put down poisons or go into killing mode to get the outcome that you want. So just always know that, your message becomes like the lighthouse, and then you get to create a whole different possibility when you come from mindful regard, which is what the whole trust process is based on, and also being willing to follow through if there is a request from an animal or insect that actually doesn't make you very comfortable. But to always look at what is possible in the situation and treat every situation differently, because that's the only way that we can come back into right relationship with nature and stop taking more than we need and stop destroying and throwing away, and look at what we're pouring down our drains, and look at how we are consuming without giving back, which is another thing that I think Thanksgiving really teaches us, is to, give thanks, an act of appreciation in a way that isn't all take, but offering some water back to the water elements and the water dragons and the nature elements that live in the water, and giving an offering to the air and giving an offering to the earth. And I show you how to do a lot of that on the spiral path, the shamanic journey through the compass directions of the ancient medicine wheel. So if you're interested in that, please have a look at that up in my store on my site. So I'm hoping that sort of makes sense without, I do go into this in great detail about how to stop projecting things onto animals and anthropomorphizing them in order to rank them less than with the fairy tales and the folklore, like the big bad wolf. And we just have to look at what's happening to the wolf population and to the shark populations because of movies like Jaws, and where they've really misidentified their true nature and the balance of the whole organic matrix on the earth. So if we can drop all our decisions and conclusions and projections and rejections and belief systems that we've bought about as true around certain species and just listen from an open heart space, does it make sense that then we can let go of the fear behind all those preconceived nonsenses and be in reverence and mindful regard of the whole morphic field and how they're contributing to balancing the earth? They say, the sharks have told me this, and one of my dear clients reminded me of this yesterday, that I had said to her 5 or 6 years ago, and I said this in 2009 as the interpreter of certain species, that three quarters of the insects and the nature species and the animals would be wiped out by 2018. And unfortunately, we haven't woken up or come to our senses yet to write that, even though some of us are working really, really hard to make a change. That communicating across species with no supposed answer or conclusion or expectation can really connect and expand you into a different space of being. And I know it's not always easy with what we consider pests, but be willing to listen to their point of view and what their needs are. It's so much kinder, and you'll find that when you start to treat all of nature with more reverence, they're going to be much more willing to support you in your own evolution and personal growth. And remember, the wild ones, they were here first, long before the first man or woman ever walked the earth. And sometimes asking them to leave is not an option. So giving an alternative from empathy, from compassion, from a widening of your perspective by just checking your inner state. Focusing on mindful breathing is a great way when you're in conflict to just come out of your mind and back into what is possible in this moment, to allow it to change. And then you can start appealing to their true nature. Like I said, with the ants or the cockroaches, you can ask them to also slow down their reproductive rate or to move their queen to a space clear of your house. And when we really truly examine the role that we as species have on our environment, then we can choose a kind of path to what we're cleaning our houses with, what we're washing our clothes with, what we're pouring down drains, and what we're throwing into the dumps and the oceans, and the effect that we're having on our river systems and the oceans. It really is the butterfly effect. So as much as we can use that for the greater good of all, we are also at the moment there's not quite enough people that have raised their consciousness up to turn that tipping point, but it is possible. So just know that when you communicate with the wild ones, ask open questions like how will they move and what concerns them and how they see through their eyes, because wild animals and insects, they're clairsentient, and their replies, as I've said over and over the last couple of days, are very direct and very simple wisdom, and their truths are incredibly profound gifts. They're beautiful because they come from the heart, and their conversations are always going to be very deep and quiet and short, because they don't know about trivialities. When we have domestic animals that live in our headspace all of the time, they do. They're not as direct and succinct all the time, but they always say that the world isn't flat, and it's simply about survival and reproduction and play. That's it. Domestic animals, yes, they can handle our mind chatter, but we also have to realize that they sound different from the wild ones because they've lived with us and they've interfaced with us over the years. So they do sound different to wild animals, but their messages are just as profound and their lessons are just as eye-opening if you can just quieten your mind down and listen with a whole heart. And when I say listen, I mean with a felt sense of listening, not with your five senses, but really to activate that sixth sense. So yeah, so it's a beautiful thing, to start to connect maybe with one ant to start, and then you can connect with the whole ant. What is it? It's not a hive. Anthill. And then you can connect with the breeding ant or the queen ant, and you can have a conversation with her. And then you can also start to connect in with the morphic field, what Rupert Sheldrake describes as how members of a particular species can be affected by each other at a distance. And we see this with elephants that just send out messages across kilometers and kilometers, warning each other of an impending tsunami to move to high ground. That is the morphic resonance field, where it might create their own non-material fields of influencing their survival mechanisms or their fight-flight mechanisms or whatever it is that's going on that's going to ensure the survival of the species. And Rupert Sheldrake's sort of extensive observations of human-animal relationships sort of suggest that morphic fields are created when living creatures form an emotional bond. They have thoughts and they have feelings and they have emotions, and they're much more connected and much more liberated in showing and expressing how they're feeling. And they don't hide it or filter it like we do. When an animal is afraid, they show fear. When they don't water it down or pretend it's not there or shove it away. They're in the emotion in the moment. And the greater the bond, the stronger the field. It's the same with us. So when members of the same social group are apart, their field continues to connect them, and it acts as this beautiful channel for communication. It's like radio waves, and it offers a very sort of theoretical framework for the concept of telepathy. Because each natural system or morphic field, it has its own kind of frequency, or what we call a matrix. So if you look at like a swallow field or a lion field, or you can even go as far as into your gut microbiome, they have their own morphic field. We have an insulin field when we talk to the spleen and the pancreas. We have the oak tree field, and so on. And in his book that I was talking about the other day, Dogs That Know When Their Owners Are Coming Home, and other explained powers of animals, it offers so much evidence to support these theories. And Swartz and Russock were another lot that described that living energy universe is explored as a grand organizing design. So think of it as our plugging into cosmic Google. The grand design is everywhere, spreading universal memory through all time and all space and all dimensions and all realities. And it makes it possible for us to have access to information beyond our five senses and also beyond our personal experiences, because obviously the way we experience the world through our five senses is where we start to get distortions on our field of what's true and what's not. So they suggest that the sort of DNA dynamic code, or the node antenna, is actually it's divine DNA. It records the information so that we can fulfill the role of our species, of tuning into that information or that Akashic records. And I love that idea, that if we can go into Akashic records through and with the help of our animal guides and our spirit, our team players or our ancestral helping spirits, then there's no reason why we can't go forward into the future to start to change the predicted outcomes. Because it's the one thing that we all have in common, is that as a species, we like predictability, we like routine, and yet it's really boring, but it creates the sense of safety for us. So, I love what Jeremy Narby suggests, that DNA, and we talk about junk DNA. That's not the junk. That's the magic. That's where the morphic field is, in my opinion. But he suggests that the DNA may function as a receiver, and I totally get a hell yes from that, because the animals have taught me that there's a class of biophotons which functions on a molecular level. So there's selective resonators for photonic information and energy challenging, and that's this dynamic system that's promoting interdependence and relationship, and it's non-linear as well as linear thought forms. It's looking at the whole rather than the parts, and it's very flexible and adaptable. So I posted beautiful chameleon for today's notes, and it's very creative in its approach to processing experiences. So I hope I didn't lose you there, because I went a little bit off tangent, but it sort of comes back to the mirror neurons, where it's just like in Avatar, it's like, I see you, I see into the soul of you. This is what intimacy is. Into me see. Well, if I can't see into myself, I cannot form and nurture those relationships that are based on empathy and compassion and feelings, right? Emotional congruency. And I think the mirror neurons play a big part in that. And also why, when we look into the eyes of a beautiful animal, we feel that soul connection, because they're mirroring back to us our pure potential that perhaps we haven't expressed yet, and why they're such incredible teachers. So I hope that's given you some food for thought on, how to deal with the so-called pests, or, the flies that we don't particularly like, or fleas, that you can actually ask them, slow down your reproductive cycle. Go and, they all serve a purpose. Even though we dislike them, if you just think about the consciousness of a fly, it's miraculous what it does in decomposing dead flesh and our waste for us. And yet we're killing the flies that are part of the balance, that actually are helping in the natural order of things to decompose our waste. So it's a beautiful thing to start to widen your perspective and actually see the beauty and the contribution of what we have labeled as pesty or disgusting or of no value. Although I still haven't quite figured out what mosquitoes' values are, but perhaps it is to be able to be invisible, especially when you turn the light on and you're trying to find the mosquito, that they have this gift of being able to disappear like magic so that they can't be killed. So I think I'll leave it at that for now. But on the pests and that, but obviously there's so much more I want to share, and I know that I want to try and keep these short, so that you can actually receive the information. And give me a yes if you found that a different, interesting way that you can actually start to be in more connection with all nature and all the species. And for those of you that asked yesterday, This is all included in my animal communication intensive online program. And I go into great depth with a lot of techniques and tools and processes to actually get the results that you want, including the first aid that we talked about yesterday, or what I call fast aid techniques. I told you how to do cortices, and I'd love to know if any of you tapped out your own cortices after yesterday's lesson, or you tried to tap out cortices on your animals. If you have an animal that's had a traumatic brain injury or a spinal injury, or is having seizures, and again, this goes for people as well, remember, everything is connected to everything, which is why I love Chinese medicine. You know, your spinal cord attaches to your brainstem. There's an electrical component to your brain and your spinal fluid and your the fluid in your brain, you know, and the meninges, and how everything is connecting, and everything has its own consciousness, and every part of the brain, every aspect of the thalamus, for example, is talking to other aspects of the thalamus. And this is where the body talk, parama body talk, and epigenetics work comes in to play, and causes incredibly dynamic changes in disease, especially chronic disease. So use cortices for those situations where you're trying to restore a healthy brain balance. If you have brain fog, if you're feeling exhausted or overwhelmed or confused, if your dog is sort of showing signs of dementia, they also get it. A lot of it, I think, has to do with the subpar food that they've been fed and the over vaccination, and that's a whole nother topic that we go into depth with in my course. But just know there are ways that we always want to prevent rather than try and cure. And we want to be promoting wellness, not a sick care model. So getting your animals onto a raw food diet, increasing essential fatty acids like coconut oil. I love coconut oil, and I love evening primrose oil. I prefer the plant-based ones to the the omegas and the krill oils, because it's depleting the krill, and the whales don't have any krill to eat. So we have to, again, be mindful of, what we're taking out of the oceans and how it's affecting other animals when we're making these choices for our own health and for our animal companions. But adding in, good fatty acids and good amino acid building blocks into our animals' diet are going to obviously help prevent dementia or brain breakdown or neural breakdown in the nervous system. But if you do have an animal that is there, look at fast aid using the Cortices technique, and obviously the more consistently you do this. I had a client that's child was having 40 to 50 seizures a day. He was only 3, and his little body was racked. He was obviously smaller than other kids. He was underweight because it takes an incredible amount of energy in those seizures, and he had to wear a helmet all the time. And I've seen this in a lot of dogs as well, that have had suffered abuse or been beaten or hit on the head, or have dementia because of previous trauma to the brain or the spinal cord. So daily cortices does wonders. And the other process, so here we go. If you've got a pen handy, you might want to write this down, or you can PM me, send me a message over on this Facebook page. Go to that little blue box that says send me a message, and just type in there, send me brain circuitry process, and I will do that for you. It's a very simple process to use. You can run it hands-on or over a distance, or you can use a surrogate just like you can with Cortices, and obviously running it daily. If you have a dog or a cat or a horse that's having severe seizures, or a person, you need to be consistent and run this and run it and run it. And you can also ask it to run while you're sleeping or the animal is sleeping. until it's complete. The body knows, so the body will turn it off when it's had all that it can take, and then the next day you can go in and it'll pick up where it left off and run deeper on those neural pathways and those brain circuits in the head. So that is the other body process that I wanted to give you today, especially for those of you that asked about seizures and TMIs and spinal injuries in your dogs and cats. Try it. And when I say follow the energy, all you have to do, I like to keep things simple. If it's not simple, it's not the trust process, is just call it out. So ask for all the circuitry that's currently creating any difficulty that this body, so the dog's body or the cat's body or your body or whoever's body it is that you're running on, with focused intention to turn on, and it will. And if you want, follow the energy. So even though sometimes we think the trauma's happened on the brain, remember, if there's been an impact here, the adhesion or the damage happens on the opposite side of the brain. Remember, the brain is kind of floating around, which is why when you have whiplash, it knocks in and the damage or the scarring or the adhesion happens not at the place of impact, but the point on the opposite reciprocal. And sometimes you might just feel cold. As the more you start working with the energy, the more in tune you are with the animal might turn their body around and actually give you their bottom, or say, can you run it here instead? So that's why I always say, there is no right or wrong way to do this. There's only the power of choice and following the intuition and the guidance and the information that the animal or the body that you're working on is giving you. And just oftentimes your hands will just go there, and you're so deeply in congruence and interconnected with that being, that you suddenly may look down and go, gosh, it's getting really warm under my hands. Everything is connected to everything. So musculoskeletal reciprocals work on the opposites. So the right tip of the shoulder, the reciprocal or the reciprocating dimensionality is the left tip of the hip. And there are a whole lot of groups of those, but you don't need to even know what they are. I just trust the body knows, follow the energy, ask for all the circuitry currently creating the difficulty the body is having to turn on and run until it's complete. And if you are doing it hands-on, you may feel your hands warm up or get cold. They might start buzzing or tingling. The animal might perk up. And if it is too intense, the energy running on that, always be aware of that you can see them and keep yourself and the animals safe. And if it's too intense, they'll walk away. They often walk away when they're finished as well. So trust that you're done, or that's all that they can take. And you can always come back and ask them if they'd like some more later on. When they start to realize that you're actually helping them and you're delivering something that feels really, really good, I go into great detail in this when we start to work with the trust process, where oftentimes when it starts to be safe for the animal to start lifting up the pain out of the tissues, it can be quite painful. And you've got to be aware that they could lash out and bite or kick because it's sore. So we need to be very mindful of our energy and be mindful of what's going on in the animal's body, and be able to back off and maybe run it from a distance or run it on yourself as a surrogacy for the animal. But there's lots of alternatives and lots of ways to be able to do that. So I hope that you found that helpful and valuable. If you have any other questions, tomorrow is going to be an open Q&A. So I'm happy to go wherever you want and let you know what your animals want you to know. So I'll be doing some live readings and body scans for your animals so that you can see how this works in motion and how quick and accurate the readings actually are when you start to make that heart-to-heart interconnectedness, and listen to what your animals are saying, and also answer any questions or concerns that you may have coming up for you. So I'll leave it at that. If you're enjoying Thanksgiving, I appreciate you, whether you are enjoying your Thanksgiving or you don't celebrate Thanksgiving. Stay in active appreciation every single day. I send you beautiful full moon blessings to you, and I will meet you back here same time tomorrow. All right. Lots of love. Bye. Mwah.